TH Financial and UK tape BKFIRD. On February 26, 2022, just 48 hours after Russian forces crossed into Ukraine, the United States and its allies pulled a financial trigger the world had never seen before. Western leaders celebrated. Analysts called it the economic equivalent of a nuclear strike. Russia, they said, would be cut off from global money flows. Banks, trade, bypass channels. Everything. The move was supposed to cripple Moscow, but instead it triggered something far bigger, a shockwave that rippled across the entire global monetary system. Because this time, the weapon didn't just hit Russia. It convinced dozens of countries that they could be next. And that realization may have started the countdown to the end of the dollar's uncontested dominance, a pattern the world has witnessed before every single time a superpower tries to weaponize its financial system. Today, we'll break down the 4 historical cases where financial power backfired, the 5-stage pattern unfolding again right now, the data proving de-dollarization is accelerating, and the timeline for when the dollar loses its global privilege. This isn't speculation. It's documented history repeating itself. Despite the headlines, SCUFT isn't a bank and it doesn't move money. It's a secure communication network connecting over 11,000 banks in more than 200 countries. When one bank wants to send funds to another, SCUFT sends the authenticated message. Bank A authorizes the transfer. The money settles through correspondent accounts, but without SCUFT, a bank is essentially cut off from global trade, created in 1973. SCUFT became the nervous system of world finance, processing over $5 trillion in messages every day. And though it's technically neutral, the system runs through New York's dollar clearing infrastructure, giving Washington tremendous leverage. That leverage became the central tool of modern sanctions. Cutting Russia out of SCUFT was supposed to be the ultimate blow. Instead, Russia stabilized within months, the central bank hiked rates, gas contracts were priced in rubles, trade was rerouted through China, India, and the Middle East. The ruble bounced back, oil exports kept flowing, and the global majority began realizing something dangerous. If reserves can be frozen and access restricted for Russia, it can happen to anyone. That's when the world began quietly moving away from the US-centric financial system. To understand why, we need to look backward, because history shows the same thing has happened 4 times before. Teach for your historical precedents. 1. Britain World War A. Before 1914, London was the heart of global finance. The British pound was the reserve currency of the world. But when the war began, Britain froze German assets and seized German-owned companies. It worked militarily, but it shattered global trust. Neutral countries realized their money wasn't safe in London. They diversified into New York. By 1944, the dollar replaced the pound. 3 decades from weaponization to replacement. 2. The U.S. vs. Iran 1970-90. When Iran took American hostages, the U.S. froze a $12 billion of Iranian assets overnight. Tactically effective, strategically catastrophic. OPEC nations realized their dollar reserves in U.S. banks could be frozen without warning. In the 1980s and 90s, they quietly reduced dollar holdings and increased gold, yen, and Deutsche Marks. Trust was damaged permanently. 3. The U.S. vs. Russia 2014. After the annexation of Crimea, the U.S. issued targeted sanctions but stopped short of a full SCUFT cutoff. This gave Russia 8 years to prepare, dumping treasuries, building huge gold reserves, and constructing its own SCUFT alternative. When 2022 came, Russia wasn't caught off guard, it was ready. 4. The U.S. vs. Russia 2022. This was the moment that changed everything. $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves were frozen as SCUFT access was severed for major banks. The message was unmistakable. The U.S. can freeze your reserves anytime. For any political reason, countries across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and even the Middle East started preparing for a world where dollar dominance wasn't safe or reliable. T5 Stage Bikifir Patarin. Every case follows the same cycle. Stage 1, a power controls the system. Britain controlled global finance. Then the United States did. Stage 2, the system becomes a weapon. Sanctions grow from targeted to sweeping. Financial infrastructure becomes a tool of foreign policy. Stage 3, the target builds alternatives. Russia used SPFS, China's currency swaps and barter. Stage 4, neutral countries hedge. This is the most dangerous stage, and we're in it right now. Countries aren't American. They're simply trying to avoid being vulnerable. China reduced treasury holdings. Saudi Arabia accepted yuan for oil. The UAE, India, Brazil, Argentina all now settle parts of trade in local currencies. Stage 5. The weapon loses power. Once alternatives exist, the threat of cutting someone off becomes less effective. The system slowly becomes multipolar instead of centralized. Just like the pound after WI, the dollar's privileges start eroding. T data no oni kan ig no ri. This isn't theory. It's global reserves 20% 1999 gay 71% 24 to 58% fastest drop in modern history. A CIPS value in 2012 trillion 2023 with 27 trillion more than doubled. Central bank gold purchases. 3 straight years over 1,000 tons, the most since the 1970s, where Russia's dollar-euro trade share 2021 to 87%, 2046%, a 27 in 3 years. A oil pricing shift, Saudi Arabia sells oil to China in yuan, Russia sells to India in rupees. The petrodollar monopoly is broken, a BRICS expansion now 9 members, representing 45% of global population, 42% of global oil supply, 36% of global GDP, preparing a commodity-linked settlement currency. This is the largest monetary shift in half a century. Tichi Timalen State US. From Britain's example, the shift took about 30 years, but technology wasn't accelerating the process back then. Now alternatives scale instantly. Digital payment systems, currency swaps, blockchain settlements, CIPS expansion. Today's replacement timeline is much shorter. Estimated timeline of 25 years from 2022. That means 2037. 24/7 is the window when the dollar moves from dominant to one currency among several, not gone, not collapsed, but no longer holding the global throne. Tishi moment ti warlakan GD. The day Russia was cut from SBUIFT, the West believed it delivered a decisive blow. In reality, it signaled to the entire world that the international financial system was no longer neutral and no longer safe from geopolitics. History shows that once a currency becomes a political weapon, the world eventually finds alternatives. Britain learned that lesson. The United States is learning it now. The Skufti cutoff didn't just hit Russia. It may have marked the moment the dollar began its long, irreversible decline.